Hello class, I hope you're all doing well. Today we're going to be drawing with graphite pencils. I had you guys get a set of graphite pencils that have, here's my set here, that have a jump from softness and hardness of graphite. So this set that I have goes from 6B all the way to 4H, okay? So the difference in those numbers and letters are the 4H is the hardest lead pencil. 4H. So that's basically referring to the density of the graphite. The more dense the graphite is, the lighter it'll go, right? It doesn't want to easily transfer to the page. I mean, it does, but you know, not as easy as, let's say, the 6B. Like here I have a 5B. It's a much softer lead. I can, like, just barely touching my finger, it's transferring over. So the idea with that is your 4H is going to be better to use for like very light values. Then you have things that are in the middle, like your 2B or HB pencils, and then your darkest pencils are the 5, 6B. Your range of pencils may be different than mine. I just wanted you to have, you have to refer to the syllabus, but I believe it was at least 4 to 6 in a range. My set, I think, is 10. Actually, it's 12. But as long as you have a range in pencils, that's fine. So, graphite pencils, working on the regular drawing paper, not the newsprint, but the drawing paper. And we're going to be drawing a complex object. So when I was looking at your niche still lifes, the majority of you had a controller, a video game controller, specifically this one, right? A PlayStation controller. So I want you to go grab that controller again, because we're going to be drawing it. If you don't have a PlayStation controller, you can grab any object as long as it's complex, meaning that it's made out of both cylinders and cubes. Okay, so let's just take a look at this thing for a moment. I want to talk about how to break this thing down into its basic geometric shapes. Okay, so holding this, I know there's a box, there's a cube that exists within this area, right? The bar, the thing that holds the two handles together. The handles, these are cylinders. Cylinders, although they're irregular shapes because they're meant to be held in a hand, right? I see some more round cylinders. So these are cylinders on top of cylinders, on top of a ball. Cylinder, cylinder, ball. These buttons are small cylinders. They're just really small and flat. You have ellipses, such as this round shape here. Ellipses. You have another square, and also you got to think about this whole thing in perspective too, right? These are cylinders, although they're kind of bowed in a little bit. The round on the bottom. And then we have on the other side, this is a flat, it kind of curves in. These are more box-like shapes. So what I'm going to talk about today is, and what we're going to be doing and exercising today, is breaking down an object into geometric shapes. We're still going to be focusing on perspective, and more importantly, proportion and distance. Okay? Alright, so to get set up, drawing paper, graphite pencils, you need an eraser, and you want to place the object on some flat surface on top of some white paper. Okay, so I have this set up off camera. I don't want the controller to be too far low. So, you know, have it, you know, slightly under your eye level. Right now it's about 1.5 feet from my eye level. We're going to draw a controller. It's going to fit on this side. So before I get started on anything here, I just want to go around and just lightly, see how light I'm drawing? I'm just barely touching the paper. I just want to kind of block out, and what I'm saying block out is just boxing out the shape before I do any line, decide on any of the lines. Okay. So I just want to draw really light. This is just, you know, it's sketching, right? It's sketching. So generally block out. If I drew too small, this would be a good time I could take it a little larger. If it was too big, I could take it smaller. But it just gives me, like, it's basically a placeholder, okay? So now I want to start breaking down the shapes of the controller. So I mentioned that there is a boxy cube shape. There's a box somewhere in here, a bar shape in 2-point perspective. So you can't see the controller, it's slightly off camera. And I want you to draw from observation. I don't want you to use a photograph. I want you to, and you should be looking at your still life more than you're looking at your drawing, or about equal. If you find yourself drawing too much and getting too much into details, it's kind of like you've given up on the observation, and you don't want to do that. So I'm keeping everything real light, loose. So now I want to look at, I have this, there's a curve. This might be a little too tall. Curve comes in this way. If I want to find the center of this, I'll do that, find my perspective center. Now I'm going to look at where the handles connect to this box shape. It kind of comes up like this. And this is a cylinder-like shape. Then the bottom is round, so it's almost got like a dome. Keeping that really light. Connects there. Now let's go up to the other side and look at it. Let's compare it to this one. So these are the same length, and it's all going in the same perspective. So my lines are going this way, so that means the edge, these lines right here, this line, and this line should all be going to a vanishing point. This is where I mentioned when we were talking about 2-point perspective, is I have to know that to check certain things. So I could arbitrarily just say, oh, this is this long, but if I just want to know, I just go, oh, well, I just draw a line this, as long as it's going with the other lines, then it should make sense, right? So this is going to be what the other handle is. Same thing, this is a cylinder-like shape. Cylinder-like shape. I'll just stand back and just kind of look at my proportions. Are these things too wide? You know, they might be a little wide right now. And I can also judge by looking at this negative space. This negative space helps me figure out if these things are too wide. So I think they are, so I'll probably have to trim these down a little bit. But I don't have to worry about that right now. I'll come back to it. Right now I'm just sketching. Okay, so remember how I told you, like when we were drawing cylinders, you know, when we had them all placed together, I mentioned the strategy of drawing what's close to you first and then working into the distance. That's what I'm doing. So that's why I'm starting here and I'm going to work my way back. If you start drawing like anywhere on the up here, you know, it's going to look really flat, more than likely, but it's also going to it's going to be hard to judge the proportions of everything if you commit and go, okay, that's the button size. Like you don't want to do something that's so small to compare everything else to. I want to do those last. So right now we're just trying to get, you know, the general shapes out of the way. So this is the middle of that curve shape. So this is where I can look at my line here. So that's somewhere in the middle. That's also telling me if this is a little wide. So this is where that plug is, right? To charge, the charging plug. Or no, the headphone jack. So I might just put a mark there. That might be a little big. I just want to put that there because I want to, we're going to draw the the analog sticks now. So I'm going to look at where this middle is, where it starts to curve. It starts to curve here, and then compare that to where the thumbsticks start to come out from the controller, the housing for the thumbsticks. So I think they're a little higher. Well, they are higher. And I'm going to look at that ellipse. If it's too thin, then I need to widen it up. If it's too wide, I need to bring it back down. But I need to really get that as close as I can during this sketch. So this is that bottom piece. This is that bottom piece here, and now I'm drawing this. So I'm drawing this right here, and I'm going to work my way down. Okay, so I have those. So this is a cylinder-like shape, so I can bring this down. This conforms to the shape of the controller, but I know that this shape exists in there, right? Something like this. This protrudes up from the controller. So I'm looking at this shape. Now I'm going to do the other side. Now I'm also seeing that this is going a little too big, so I'm probably going to bring this over a little more. I think this comes down. And I'll tighten this up. If I see it, I'll make a note, you know, a mental note. It also cups under here, and then it conforms to the shape of the controller. Well, I don't know. Let's look at this distance. I think this is going too wide now, so I'm going to bring this down just a little bit. This line down. And then I'm going to look at the, what is it, the touchpad, right? So this line that goes here is also going to conform to this line, and this line. I'm comparing it to where it overlaps the analog sticks, and it looks like it cuts it right in half. If I was to follow these lines down, it would go somewhere in half of the controller, like that. So I'm going to stop right here and just mention something. So as I'm drawing, you know, I'm walking through like how I'm thinking about this. But when I'm drawing anything, this is exactly what I'm doing in my mind. You know, I'm just speaking to you, just kind of telling you, like, okay, this is what this is why I'm doing this, and you know, so it makes some kind of sense. It's just a matter of breaking down things to their basic geometric shapes, getting them the right distance and the right size in comparison to each other, and then you start honing in on like value and some of the you know, shifting some of the other subtle distances and trying to get things even sharper and more accurate. Okay, so there's the touchpad roughly. Okay, now I'm going to go over to the buttons. These circles, and because they're in perspective, they're ellipses. So I see it kind of brushes right up against, they kind of brush right up against the housing, of the analog sticks. Okay, that looks close. Like I said, that's what I'm trying to get. I'm trying to get everything close. So let's go over to these buttons. I'm going to draw these first. So this thing is kind of like a very shallow dish. Like it's not completely flat. On one side it's flat. On one side it does this kind of a thing. They follow the same vanishing points, diagonal lines to the vanishing points as everything else. So I'll draw a line here to be the middle. And that line, the middle of this, should be the middle of this, because in that regard, it's symmetrical. Okay, so the middle of these buttons is also going to be the middle of these buttons. Because what happens is if we draw one set too high, then the whole thing looks wonky. We know it's a symmetrical object, so if if we're doing this side, we got to do this side at the same time. Okay, so let's take a look at what I got so far. Alright, so just looking at it at a glance, I can tell this needs to come out a little bit more. Let's see what else. Something's going on with the buttons. I think I need to bring these down a little bit. These, the buttons need to be a little smaller. What else? You know, I think that's a pretty good start. You know, I'm just noticing what's off about it. Alright, so I'm going to blend this in a little bit. I went a little bit darker than I normally would because I needed, you know, my drawing to show up on the camera for you guys to see. So I went a little too dark here and here. I'm just going to blend this in a little bit. Let's talk about some of the different LEDs. Alright, let's compare the 4H to maybe like a 5B. So like I said, the LED's a lot harder. So you can still go pretty dark. But here's the same marks with the same amount of pressure with the 6 or 5B. Even my lightest marks are darker, and my dark lines are really dark. So when we're trying to create value on the drawing, we want to use that for its advantage. The softer graphite blends a little bit easier too. I'm going to go back with the H and, you know, basically sketch it out again. Any areas, I'm not going to basically trace the same drawing though. You're still making improvements. I'm still observing my still life even when I go around the second time and making adjustments. So I'll do a couple passes. Alright, do a couple passes. Maybe I'll jump from the H, the harder one, to maybe one of the softer ones. And basically I'm going to speed this up and I'm going to kind of work you through how I'm going to apply value. I will say, try not to make this a too blended drawing. I want you to focus on just mark making, creating hatch marks and value with hatch marks. And you can blend it and go back over it too. Alright, so I'm going to put this on speed it up, and you can see how I just go through and make another round and refine the drawing. So right now, you know, I'm tackling these buttons again. I'm starting to add some value in here, starting to build up some of my marks so I can try to get these, you know, because the controller, you can see it's kind of shiny, sort of reflective surface. So I'm trying to catch the light. You know, I can always take things, I can always blend them down a little bit, take them a little darker, and then come back in with my eraser, you know, and pick out some of those highlights. Pick out some of those highlight areas. On the, you can see on the buttons and like the control of the analog stick here, my shadows are falling really hard on these edges. These edges right here. You know, the shadows are falling down here. I'm going to put in the overall shadow as I go along too. I want you to find the difference between the light and the dark, and that's going to create the edges. Try to avoid doing, you know, strong outlines. Instead of drawing a button like this, for example, draw the button like this. Draw the shadow. This might be a little hard to see, but draw the difference between the light and the dark, and that'll give you these edges. I'm going to work my way across, and you know, I'll jump around. I'll keep jumping around a little bit. It's just every time, you know, every so often I'll take a step back and, you know, give myself some distance from the drawing. I also will look back at the silhouette, you know, the overall silhouette of the shape, constantly comparing one thing against another, you know, as far as the proportions and size. Yeah, I'm still building the drawing, okay? This takes time. You can't, it's hard to rush to the end of it, especially with graphite pencils, because unlike charcoal, they don't mix. It's not as malleable, but it's also nice because, you know, you build up the drawing by just thousands of little marks. You know, it's about overlapping those marks in order to create the value. So this is about where I want you to be in about the middle of the class, you know, drawing for about an hour and a half. This is about where you should be. Like I said, slowly starting to build up value. You can see it's a lot of mark making. You know, questioning the shapes, making adjustments. This is about what I expect to see, and I want to see that framework. Okay, I want to see that you put the framework and you looked at the shapes. If you follow those steps and the steps that I've showed you at the beginning, and you work on it this way, the likeness, it's going to come about. Okay, it's hard to jump to the likeness immediately. So this is what I want to see by the middle of class. Just one sketch, large, you know, at least taking up half the page. And make sure you email me with any questions.